Hello, my name is Rich Howard, owner of Architectural Builder Supply, and this video is to bring you a closer look at the Bommer number LB4391C-400-630. This is a single-acting spring hinge, is what it is. And let's take a look at one, and then we're going to dissect the part number a bit, see what we're dealing with. The hinges sold as each. There happen to be 2 in a box, but if you ordered 3, there'd only be a box with maybe one of them in it. Just be mindful they're sold per hinge. Sometimes people need 2, sometimes people want 3, or 4. Not 4 if it's a fire-rated door, though. Although, actually, it could be. If it was a fire-rated Dutch door, it could be. But not if it was an 8-foot tall door. So this is what an LB4391C looks like. It's a single-acting spring hinge. Okay, so let's dissect the part number. LB is Bommer's designation for maintenance-free type of bearing construction that you're going to see on their single-acting spring hinges and other hinges as well. It refers to maintenance-free construction. It also refers to 3-knuckle. You can get other LB hinges from Bommer that are not spring-loaded, but they will be a 3-knuckle hinge, as is this hinge. So it means 3-knuckle, it means maintenance-free bearing construction. Now the 4391C, all of that conspires to mean many things, and in no particular order. It does mean it's a full mortise hinge. You can see from the swag on the hinge leaves here that the leaves are meant to be mortised flush to the edge of the door and frame when the door is brought to the closed position. It means that it is a hinge with 1/4-inch radiused corners and that it is a contract grade. That's what the C stands for. 130 thousandths leaf thickness on this. I believe that's what it is. 130 on a 4x4? Yeah, 130. 130 thousandths. The location of the screws would be considered the standard templated location for a 4-inch hinge. If someone said you needed a template pattern for the screw holes, they specifically mean this sort of half moon or half circle position. And every 4x4 hinge made that complies with the template pattern, the term template would mean a piece of paper with some technical dimensions on it, sure, but it also, in a case of a hinge, means the exact location of these holes that you can review on the template. Okay, so it's a standard, so to speak. As long as we're talking about template, then this is a standard. The point is you can get a 4-inch hinge from Bommer in lots of different hole configurations to suit and accommodate different door manufacturers' requirements. It also means it's stainless steel. The base material is solid stainless. Stainless has a small amount of magnetism when it's been machined and worked. I think passivating stainless would remove that. That is just an unrelated comment that I just made. You'll see a requirement occasionally for stainless material to be passivated. I've never had it requested on a hinge. No, I haven't. And I think that covers everything about the 4391C. The dash 400, that's important. That's the size. It means in Bommer speak that it's 4-inch tall and 4-inch wide. Okay. It does not mean that the hinge is 4-inch wide and 4-inch tall, however, because the height is the first dimension. That's really important to at least understand that. You can order a 4x4 not knowing which is the first dimension, but it is important to know what the first dimension is, whether you're dealing with doors or louvers in doors or roof hatches or access panels. The first dimension is clearly defined. On a hinge, it's the height. The height is the real important dimension, or the more important dimension, because it is really going to really determine the hinge's capability of handling the job that it's being asked to do. The height is the important thing when it comes to a hinge. The width is less important, but the width is important when you start to think about, okay, am I going to clear around what I need to clear around in the instance where you need a wide throw version of a spring hinge. I'm not aware of any wide throw spring hinges. Don't think that those exist. Don't recall having sold one. So just be mindful. It's 4x4. Why is that important? Again, if you can buy a spring hinge that's 4.5 by 4. Okay, you're going to have your door and frame guy make a door and frame. He needs to know that it's 4.5 by 4. Okay, that's the important part. Then the rest of the part number is 630. This hinge, the 4391C, is available in 630, which is a brushed finish. It's available in 629, which would be a polished finish. I am not a fan of hinge manufacturers that don't do as good of a job as they can possibly do on the inside of what I call the crotch of the hinge between the leaf and the barrel. I would expect this preparation to be a little bit better in there. Yeah, and it's not just a smudge. It's just a slight amount of finishing that's not been done on the hinge in here. I don't like that. I don't. It's atypical for Bommer is the bottom line. Now, let's go over the extended description details down below. It's full mortise contract grade, UL listed for fire doors. We're going to talk about that in a moment, except to say right now, you can use them on fire-rated doors. There are lots of requirements, however. Grade 1 certified by BHMA. That means this hinge has been tested to 1 million cycles. In fact, I spoke to the engineer at Bommer not too many months ago, and we were having a conversation about a failed spring hinge, and he says, well, it ain't my spring hinge that failed. And he went on to tell me that he's tested a particular spring hinge, and he turned the machinery off when it had hit 3.6 million cycles, some ridiculously high number. And not that Bommer items don't break, everything breaks. But they go through and test their stuff. They are very involved with being able to attest to the quality of the material. BHMA is a third party, obviously. It's non-handed. You can install this on left-hand doors. You can install it on right-hand doors, whichever you like. Easily adjustable spring tension, which we'll get to in a moment. ANSI templated screw hole pattern. We talked about that. Pivot point aligns with a commercial butt hinge that has a gauge thickness or leaf thickness between 123 thousandths and 134 thousandths. What that means is this. You can mix and match this with a standard ball bearing non-spring loaded hinge as long as it's 4-inch wide when the leaf is open and that the leaves are between 123 and 134 thousandths thick, because it would be very common for you to put 2 of these on a door and then 1 ball bearing hinge. Don't use a plain bearing hinge. That would not be a wise thing to do, because spring hinges really need as much assistance as they can to getting a door closed as best as possible. Now, it is made of stainless, 1/4-inch radius. How is that achieved? Well, a lot of customers call up and all they know it has this rounded corner. Well, there are 2 rounded corners, 1/4-inch and 5/8. 5/8 is achieved, 1/4-inch is achieved when you're routing the door and frame with a 1/2-inch diameter bit. 1/2-inch diameter, 1/4-inch radius. 5/8 radius is, yeah, you guessed it, an 1.25-inch bit. 1.25-inch bits are very often used, especially in residential construction, because to do a preparation with a 1/2-inch bit, I'm going like this. And what I just did is literally how long it takes to prep a hinge. I've done it thousands of times. An 1.25-inch bit is much faster. When you're doing 1,000 doors a day, it's much faster. The downside is it leaves a much larger radius that is more work to square off if your end user wants square corners. So 1/4-inch radius is going to be at a very common item. If you find that you can only get square corner hinges, well, then just, if it's a wood door and a wood frame, just square the corners. Sometimes it's a lot easier. Although some people, it just doesn't dawn on them that you can easily do that. Or for some folks, you can't do it because you don't have a chisel. Understood. Get the 1/4-inch radius. Maximum door size is 3x7. That's why I went earlier and said, well, not on an 8-foot door. You wouldn't have these, because not on an 8-foot fire-rated door. If it's a fire-rated door, you can't go over 3 foot by 7 foot. The rest of what's down below here are weight limits, which we'll get to. There's a link to the tension pin and the tension rod should you need to buy those separately. We'll talk about those in a moment. Now let's move to the link that's actually titled template. That's going to give you the dimensional properties of everything on this hinge. Okay? If you're not sure if this hinge is going to fit in the place that you need to fit it into, in terms of the location of the holes, look at the template. print it out, take it to your opening with your tape measure and compare. And if that's not it, reach out to us. We'll help you find one that is. In all instances, we'll find the exact hinge or a hinge that is so close that it would be less than 5/1000ths of an inch off. Okay, so we'll be able to help you with that. Any questions on the template, reach out to us. Then we're going to get to certifications and hinge selection guide. That's actually printed as well. Much of it is printed on the back of the box. If your hinge comes in a box, it'll probably look like this. Not that your hinge will always come in a box. It might not. So be mindful that the document is there. If you need that information, it's on the site as well. It gives us a table that shows us for 4x4 hinges, an 85-pound door would be where you're using 2 spring hinges and a butt hinge. Again, ball bearing. Don't use a plain bearing hinge. 110-pound door, you're going to use all 3 spring hinges. If this is a fire-rated door, there are some things that are mandatory as dictated by code. NFPA, National Fire Protection Agency. Code tells us that the door cannot be, and that document is NFPA 80, by the way. That's the fire, that is the document that gives an overview of the requirements to be within NFPA 80's guidelines of a proper installation. NFPA 80 is not code. NFPA 80 is a document published by the NFPA. However, NFPA 80 becomes code when a jurisdiction adopts part of that, adopts NFPA 80 in whole or in part. Then it becomes code. So the document itself isn't code. But if your village is telling you per NFPA 80, you've got to watch out for that size, how many hinges. Then, you may not realize this, but having the product labeled, a physical label on the hardware, is mandatory for all pieces of hardware on a door. Technically mandatory. Not technically, it's mandatory. It's if it's adopted by your code officials, it's code. And on spring hinges, it's mandatory. Now, that ball bearing hinge that we talked about, if you're going to mix and match, that doesn't have to bear visual evidence. The label can be a decal, the label can be stamping, etc. But spring hinges must be labeled. If you see a spring hinge that's not stamped, and they are out there big time, you're not permitted to use that on a fire-rated door. I wouldn't use it on a fire-rated door because it's never been tested. It's never been found to survive a fire test. A fire test, these are probably 3-hour tests. Within 90 seconds or 2 minutes or 3 minutes, the temperature in a fire test goes to 1800 degree Fahrenheit and then basically parks there for the next 2 hours and 57 minutes. The hardware that you use must be up to the task. This Bommer hinge has been found to be compliant with the requirements of that test. If it is on a spring hinge, also on a different note, if it's something that you're doing that has to be handicap compliant, you'll want to refer to the ADA document, which is federal code, that will tell you that there's a 2-second requirement for the door to close. And don't quote me on the specifics. I think it's about 85 degree down to about 15 degree. It has to be 2 seconds. So be mindful of that as well. The rest of the document there, I think we've covered. If you're going with non-labeled doors, no bigger than 4 foot, no taller, you can go past 7 foot. For every 30 inches beyond 7'6", 90 inch, add another hinge, and possibly a spring hinge. Now, the next document, the final document, are the installation instructions. That's also on the box. Here's the bottom line. Hang your door. Just hang it. Then when you get the door hung, please hang it with the tension collar pointed towards the top of the door. You can put it this way as well if you want. Not a problem. For every order that you place, you'll get at least 1 tension rod. For every hinge that you order, you'll get 1 tension pin, that silver pin. Every hinge needs a tension pin. Every order needs a tension rod. If this client ordered literally 12 of these hinges, they only need 1 tension rod. Each box probably has one in it. When you install the hinge, when you hang the door, you're going to insert that tension collar and then rotate it clockwise. if you've hung it with this, rotate it counterclockwise. As you rotate it clockwise, you reveal new additional holes. It's into one of those new additional holes that you're going to insert the tension pin. You'll continue to ratchet and relocate the pin to set your tension. 3 holes maximum tension if you're going to 180 degree. 3 holes. 4 holes if you're going to 90 degree. If you are not getting the job done with that sort of situation, then maybe your opening is not a candidate for a spring hinge installation. If you hear creaking or contorting on the spring hinge, that's definitely evidence of something possibly going wrong. I've had people call and say my spring in my hinge broke. Oh, okay, really? How big's the door? Well, it's 3 foot by 7 foot, but it's 16 gauge. Okay, that's a door that's probably 140 pounds. How many spring hinges were on the door? 1, maybe 2. I forget what the quote was, but it certainly wasn't 3. And the situation was basically the quantity of spring hinges, the size of the door, how far they were opening the door, all conspired to be wait a minute, you're way underpowered in the spring tension department. It's no wonder that it broke. How many pins of tension you have on it? I don't know, 7 or 8. It's going to break. You tell Bommer that, they're going to say, yeah, it's going to break. So hang your door, set your tension, test. If you're doing 2 hinges on a door, middle and bottom, leave the top for that ball bearing hinge, because 70% of the door weight is actually borne by that top hinge. Okay, 70%. If you're doing 3, obviously all 3, the whole 9 yards. Now, I'm not a fan of spring hinges at all. I don't think they're appropriate. I don't think they're the best way to self-close a door. I don't think that they're good for handicap compliance with the 2-second rule. I don't think that they're necessarily something that can be trusted in all instances of a fire-rated opening, meaning that they don't always close and latch. Latch is the key part. However, I do recognize that there are, in certain instances, no other option. Okay, whether that be a condo building on the stairwell doors where they're just not going to spend the money on 100 door closers. Well, 100 would be an extreme. Well, no, 300 door closers, because the entry doors, not only the stairwell doors, the suite entry doors, those are fire rated. Who wants a commercial door closer on the inside of their condo? Probably not a lot of people, but they sure do exist. The advantage of a door closer is that you have hydraulic control. You can control the door. With a spring hinge, what do you have? Stored energy. Well, you have potential. You have stored energy, then a release. So what needs to happen? Well, that spring hinge needs to overcome the weight of the door, all the air resistance that it encounters over 20 square feet, which is not insignificant. It needs to overcome the resistance of the latch hitting the strike plate. It needs to close and securely latch the door, and it needs to do so in such a way that is dependable. You can also fight a situation where you have a frame where one jamb is towed, kicked out, where that door literally has to go like this. That's going to be tough to get that to reliably close. You'll have changing of seasons. You set a spring hinge in the middle of summer in a Chicago 3-flat on the front door where there's an electric strike. In the winter, you're going to require some different settings. The spring hinge will certainly allow you to adjust, but there are times when you need to get that thing moving so quick that it basically slams. I'm not a fan of spring hinges because I know that they prematurely compromise the integrity of the wall. So, use them when you must. Avoid them if you can. And being a spring hinge salesman, I also sell closers, so there you go. That's how you deal with this kind of stuff. Their LB series is available in lots of different configurations, sizes, finishes. If you made this an LB4390C, that'll be a steel-based hinge, and they can do every finish Bommer can do. The last thing I'd like to point out to you would be the Bommer logo, and right above it says Made in USA, a fact that Bommer's quite proud of, as am I, to represent them. Finally, there's a link below this video to the manufacturer's page where you can pull up. Screws are included, by the way, all machine and all wood. There's a link below this video to the manufacturer's page where you can pull up not only all of the Bommer products that we sell, but also a link to the manufacturer's website, as well as a link to the full product catalog. If you have any questions on the Bommer LB4391C-400-630 or any other Bommer product, please feel free to reach out to us. And thank you.